Ethan Brooks had never been one to hover over his wife's shoulder or pry into her business. Trust was the cornerstone of their marriage. At least, that's what he'd always believed. He left for work every morning with the comfort of knowing Lily was home, typing away in her sunlit office, earning her keep as a freelance graphic designer. Their life was simple, steady, predictable. Until that Tuesday. Ethan's meeting in Midtown had wrapped up earlier than expected, freeing him to head home by lunchtime. He'd been looking forward to surprising Lily with her favorite turkey club sandwich from Carla's Deli. As he pulled into their driveway, a flicker of excitement danced through him. Carrying the sandwich bag, he let himself in quietly. The house smelled faintly of her lavender diffuser. He glanced into the kitchen, spotless as usual, and walked toward her office. Her voice, muffled by the door, stopped him in his tracks. "Brandon, stop," Lily's voice teased, laughter punctuating her words. "You're going to get me in trouble." Ethan froze, sandwich forgotten in his hand. "Well, maybe I wouldn't flirt so much if you didn't make it so easy," a man's voice replied. It was smooth with a low, confident lilt. Ethan's stomach tightened. He inched closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. Okay, Lily giggled. "Let's focus. Show me the campaign mock-up again. And stop trying to distract me." There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "You're terrible, you know that?" Ethan's hand trembled around the deli bag. Was he misinterpreting what he'd just heard? He leaned closer, trying to catch more of the conversation. "I'll stop being terrible if you promise to have lunch with me tomorrow," Brandon said, his tone dripping with playful insistence. Ethan didn't hear Lily's response. His head buzzed too loudly. He backed away, feeling as though he'd stumbled into a dream. One of those vivid, disorienting ones where nothing made sense, but the unease was palpable. Retreating to the kitchen, he set the sandwich on the counter, his appetite gone. Was it harmless banter? Just co-workers blowing off steam during a tense work session? Ethan wanted to believe that. Lily was naturally warm and charismatic. She had a way of drawing people in. He'd seen it 100 times. But this felt different. That evening, Ethan sat on their plush gray couch, sipping a beer as Lily perched next to him, scrolling through her phone. The glow of the television bathed the room in soft, flickering light. "So, how was your day?" he asked casually, though his voice betrayed an edge of curiosity. "Pretty good," she replied without looking up. "Lots of client calls. You know how it is." Ethan studied her face. She looked relaxed, content even. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose bun, her favorite sweatshirt hanging casually off one shoulder. It was so normal, so ordinary. But the exchange he'd overheard earlier gnawed at the edges of his mind. "Anyone interesting on the calls?" he pressed, trying to sound nonchalant. Lily glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "Nope, just the usual." "Why?" He shrugged, forcing a smile. "Just curious." "Uh-huh," she said, narrowing her eyes playfully. "You're acting weird." "Am I?" "Yes." She poked his arm with a grin, then turned her attention back to her phone. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. Maybe he was reading too much into things. He had no proof of anything inappropriate. And yet, a small, unwelcome seed of doubt had taken root. He finished his beer in silence, his thoughts swirling. Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't help but notice little changes in Lily's behavior, things he might have overlooked before. She seemed glued to her phone more than usual, her conversations with clients abruptly ending when he entered the room. She laughed more during her work calls, her tone light and almost flirtatious. And then there was her appearance. Lily had always been effortlessly beautiful, but she'd recently started wearing makeup during the day, even when she wasn't going anywhere. Her outfits, once a rotation of cozy sweaters and leggings, now included tailored blouses and fitted jeans. Could all be coincidence, Ethan told himself. But his mind wouldn't stop replaying Brandon's voice over and over. By Friday, Ethan's patience had worn thin. After finishing the dishes, he wandered into the laundry room to sort through a pile of clothes. As he emptied Lily's coat pocket, a small plastic rectangle slipped out and clattered to the floor. He bent down, picking it up. A hotel key card. Ethan stared at it, his heart pounding. He turned it over in his hand, noting the name of the upscale hotel downtown. His mind raced. There could be a logical explanation. Maybe she met a client there or borrowed the jacket from someone. But deep down, he knew. Ethan clenched the key card in his fist, his breathing uneven. He debated confronting her right away but hesitated. He needed more than just suspicion. For now, he would wait. The next morning, Ethan sat at the breakfast table, his coffee growing cold as Lily hummed to herself in the kitchen. She was making scrambled eggs, moving around with her usual effortless ease. From the outside, everything looked normal, perfect, even, but the hotel key card in his pocket felt like a burning coal, heavy and accusing. He watched her carefully as she plated their breakfast. Her auburn hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her smile was as warm as ever when she set his plate down in front of him. "You okay? You've been quiet," she said, settling into her seat across from him. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Long week." Her hazel eyes softened. "You've been working so hard lately. I was thinking we could do something fun this weekend. Maybe a hike?" Her words sounded sincere, and for a moment, Ethan felt the weight on his chest lighten. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent reason for everything. But then he remembered her laughter on that Zoom call. The way she'd said Brandon's name. The way she'd hidden her phone the other night when he'd sat beside her. "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "A hike sounds great." Ethan decided to play the long game. He'd always prided himself on being calm under pressure, and now wasn't the time to lose his cool. If Lily was hiding something, she'd eventually slip up. The hotel key card stayed tucked away in his desk drawer at work, a grim reminder of the questions he didn't yet have answers to. That evening, Lily was on another call when Ethan returned home from work. Her office door was closed, but her voice carried through the thin walls. He paused in the hallway, his ears straining. "Stop! You're terrible," she said, her laughter ringing out. Ethan clenched his jaw. He pressed his hand against the door, tempted to barge in, but forced himself to step back. "You can't just—" Her voice dropped, making it harder to hear. He backed away slowly, retreating to the living room. His heart was racing again, the doubts crashing over him like waves. When Lily emerged half an hour later, she looked radiant, her cheeks flushed and her smile wide. She didn't even seem surprised to see him home. "Hey, babe," she said, walking over to kiss him on the cheek. "How was your day?" "Fine," Ethan said curtly. Her smile faltered. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he lied, forcing a grin. "Just tired." Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat in the living room with his laptop. He opened her Instagram, scrolling through her posts and tagged photos. Everything looked normal. Pictures of their dog, shots of her favorite latte art, and selfies with him at family gatherings. But then he noticed a pattern in her likes and comments. A name kept popping up. Brandon McLean. Ethan clicked on the profile, his heart hammering. Brandon was tall, with a square jaw and an easy smile. His profile was a carefully curated mix of gym selfies, group photos with colleagues, and candid shots of him hiking in scenic locations. One photo stood out. A shot of him at a rooftop bar, holding up a glass of whiskey. The caption read, "Work hard, play harder." Among the comments was one from Lily. "You're incorrigible," followed by a laughing emoji. Ethan's stomach churned. It wasn't damning evidence, but it was enough to make his blood boil. He closed the laptop, his hands shaking. The next day, Ethan left work early again, claiming he had a headache. He parked a few blocks from their house, waiting. At 2:45 p.m., a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat as the passenger door opened and Brandon stepped out. He was even more smug in person, Ethan thought bitterly. Brandon adjusted his blazer, glanced at the house, and walked up to the front door. Ethan watched as Brandon rang the bell. Moments later, Lily opened the door, her face lighting up. She stepped aside to let him in, closing the door behind him. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, torn between storming in and staying put. Instead, he sat there, stewing in his anger. He checked his watch, timing how long Brandon stayed. An hour and a half later, Brandon emerged, looking every bit as composed as when he'd arrived. Ethan waited until he drove off before heading into the house. Lily was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She looked up when he walked in, her expression neutral. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her tone light. Ethan stared at her, searching for any hint of guilt. "Yeah. Feeling better, though." "Good," she said, taking a sip of wine. He wanted to ask her about Brandon, to confront her then and there, but instead, he forced a smile and headed upstairs. He needed more than a hunch or a handful of coincidences. He needed the truth. Ethan had always considered himself a reasonable man. But lately, reason was slipping through his fingers like sand. That Friday, he came home earlier than usual, using the same excuse as before, a canceled meeting. The house was unusually quiet when he stepped inside. He placed his keys on the counter, pausing to listen. From upstairs came faint sounds. Voices, muffled and indistinct. He moved cautiously, his footsteps silent against the hardwood floor. As he climbed the stairs, the voices became clearer. "Lily, you're amazing," a man's voice said, low and intimate. "Sure," Lily replied, her tone playful. "You're going to get me in trouble." Ethan stopped at the top step, his hand gripping the banister so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I think that ship's already sailed," the man said, laughing softly. The laughter was followed by a muffled thump, like the sound of a body falling onto a bed. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. Without another thought, he stormed down the hall to their bedroom and shoved the door open. The scene hit him like a physical blow. Lily was on the bed, her blouse unbuttoned and hair disheveled. Brandon was leaning over her, his shirt untucked and his belt undone. They both froze, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. "Ethan," Lily gasped, scrambling to sit up. Brandon jumped back, fumbling with his pants. I didn't know you were home," he stammered. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, his body trembling with fury. "Are you serious right now?" he barked, his voice echoing off the walls. Lily's face crumpled. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "You're half naked in our bed with another man, and you're going to tell me it's not what it looks like?" Brandon, now fully dressed, took a cautious step toward the door. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I'll just—" "Don't you dare," Ethan roared, pointing at him. "You don't get to just walk out of here like nothing happened." "Ethan, please," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "Let him go. This is between us." Ethan turned to her, his expression incredulous. "Between us? Are you kidding me? You invited this guy into our house, into our bed, and now you want to have a private conversation?" Brandon seized the opportunity to slip past Ethan, his footsteps pounding down the stairs. The front door slammed moments later, leaving Ethan and Lily alone in the suffocating silence. Lily buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. His body ached with the tension of holding himself back, of not breaking something or screaming at the top of his lungs. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice low and cold. Lily looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Ethan, how long?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "A couple of months," she whispered. Ethan laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. "Couple of months. So all those late-night calls, the hotel key card I found, you found that?" She interrupted, her eyes wide. "Of course I found it," he snapped. "What, you thought I wouldn't notice you sneaking around, laughing with Brandon on your calls? Do you think I'm stupid, Lily?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "No, Ethan, you're not stupid. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Spare me the cliches," he said, his voice dripping with venom. She reached for him, but he stepped back, the distance between them feeling like a chasm. "I love you," she said desperately. This was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." Ethan scoffed. "Didn't mean anything? You've been seeing him for months, Lily. In our house. In our bed. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Her sobs grew louder, but Ethan felt no sympathy. He turned and walked out of the room, his chest heaving. Downstairs, he grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. "Ethan, wait," Lily called after him, her voice breaking. "Please don't go. We can talk about this." But he didn't stop. He needed air. He needed space. Most of all, he needed to figure out if there was anything left of their marriage worth saving. Ethan didn't remember much about the drive. He'd ended up at the empty parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. He parked and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel as if it could anchor him to reality. His mind reeled, replaying every moment of the confrontation in excruciating detail. The image of Lily and Brandon, her flushed cheeks, his unbuttoned belt, seared into his brain. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, one he couldn't stop or look away from. After what felt like hours, Ethan's phone buzzed. Lily. The screen lit up with her name over and over as she called repeatedly. He let it ring each time, unwilling to hear whatever rehearsed explanation or apology she had waiting for him. Eventually, the calls stopped. Then came the texts. "Ethan, please come home. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just let me explain." He stared at the messages, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. What was there to say? That he'd been blindsided? That her betrayal had gutted him? Instead, he powered off his phone and leaned back in the seat, his head pounding. By the time Ethan returned to the house, it was past midnight. The lights were still on, and he could see Lily's silhouette through the living room window. When he stepped inside, the air was heavy with tension. Lily sat on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked up at him with a mixture of relief and dread. "You came back," she said softly. "For now," Ethan replied, his voice flat. She stood, taking a hesitant step toward him. "Can we talk?" Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "Talk then." Lily wrung her hands, searching for the right words. "I know I messed up. I don't even know where to start, but you have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you." "Congratulations," Ethan said bitterly. "You failed." She winced, tears pooling in her eyes again. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Started as just harmless flirting. "Harmless?" He interrupted, his voice rising. "You call bringing him into our house, into our bed, harmless?" Lily flinched, shaking her head. "No, it wasn't harmless. I know that. God, Ethan, I don't even recognize myself right now." "Neither do I," he snapped. "Because the woman I married wouldn't do this." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Ethan watched her, torn between his anger and the small, stubborn part of him that still cared. "Why Lily?" he asked finally, his voice quieter. "Why him?" She looked up at him, her cheeks streaked with tears. "I don't know," she whispered. "First it was just fun. He made me feel wanted, like I was exciting again. And I guess I liked the attention." Ethan felt a fresh wave of pain at her words. "So I wasn't enough for you?" "No, that's not it," she said quickly. "You're amazing, Ethan. You've always been amazing. This wasn't about you. It was about me. My own insecurities, my own mistakes." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Great. So what, I'm supposed to just forgive you because you had a midlife crisis?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm asking for a chance to make this right." Ethan stared at her, his emotions a chaotic storm. He wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the same hurt she'd inflicted on him. But he also wanted to understand, to figure out how their marriage had unraveled so quickly. "I don't know if I can do this," he said finally. "Please," Lily said, standing and walking toward him. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on us." Ethan held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "I need time," he said, his voice strained. "I can't make any decisions right now." Lily nodded, her expression desperate. "Take all the time you need. Just, please don't shut me out completely." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked up the stairs, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his thoughts. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he wondered if he'd ever be able to look at Lily the same way again. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. When he finally did drift off, his dreams were a chaotic blur. Memories of happier times with Lily twisted with the haunting image of her with Brandon in their bed. He woke up before dawn, his heart pounding and his chest tight. Lily was already awake when he came downstairs. She was sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee and staring out the window. She looked up when he entered, her face pale and drawn. "Morning," she said softly. Ethan grunted in response, heading straight for the coffee maker. "I made some already," she offered, gesturing to the pot. "I see that," he replied, pouring himself a cup without looking at her. The tension between them was suffocating. Ethan took his coffee to the living room, leaving Lily alone in the kitchen. He couldn't bear to sit across from her, not after everything. He spent the morning alternating between scrolling aimlessly on his phone and staring at the television, the sound muted. Lily lingered in the kitchen, giving him space but occasionally casting him hesitant glances. By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his jacket and keys. "Where are you going?" Lily asked, stepping into the doorway. "Out," he said curtly. "For how long?" "I don't know." Her face crumpled, but she nodded, stepping aside. Ethan ended up at Mike's place, his best friend since college. Mike lived in a small but cozy apartment downtown, cluttered with sports memorabilia and empty pizza boxes. He opened the door in a t-shirt and boxers, looking surprised but not unhappy to see Ethan. "Dude, you look like hell," Mike said, stepping aside to let him in. "Feel like it too," Ethan muttered, dropping onto the couch. Mike grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge and handed one to Ethan before sitting down.
"All right, spill."
"What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, staring at the beer in his hand. Finally, he said, "Lily cheated on me." Mike's eyes widened. "No way."
"Yeah."
"Caught her in the act." "With who?" "Some guy from work. Brandon." Mike let out a low whistle.
"Damn, man."
"I'm sorry." Ethan nodded, taking a long swig of beer. "You staying at the house?" Mike asked after a moment. "For now," Ethan said. "I don't know what else to do. She wants to fix things, but I don't even know if I can look at her without seeing that." Mike leaned back, crossing his arms. "You've got options, man. You don't have to decide anything right now. But if you ask me, if she's serious about fixing things, let her do the work. Therapy, counseling, whatever. You just focus on you for a while." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's not that simple, Mike. We've been together for 8 years. Married for 5. That's a lot of history to just walk away from." "Yeah, but she walked away first, didn't she?" Ethan flinched at the bluntness of the words but didn't argue. That night, Ethan checked into a hotel. He couldn't stand the thought of sleeping in the same bed where Lily had betrayed him, and the sight of her made his chest ache in a way he didn't know how to handle. Lily texted him several times, but he ignored most of them. "Are you okay? Please let me know where you are."
"I'm worried."
"I'll give you space, but please don't shut me out completely." Finally, he sent a single reply, "I need time." Her response came almost immediately. "I understand. Take as much time as you need. I love you." He stared at the message for a long time before turning off his phone. Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office to avoid going home. He confided in no one except Mike, who checked in on him regularly. Meanwhile, Lily continued to text him sporadically, though her messages grew shorter and less frequent as the days passed. Ethan found himself thinking about her more often than he wanted to admit. Memories of their life together came unbidden. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed, road trips with the windows down and music blaring, the way she used to light up when he walked into a room. But those memories were tainted now, overshadowed by the image of her and Brandon. One evening, Mike called him. "Hey man," Mike said. "How you holding up?" "Same as usual," Ethan replied. "You think you're ready to talk to her yet?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. Look, I'm not saying you have to forgive her or even stay with her, but maybe hearing her out will help you figure out what you want." Ethan sighed. "Maybe. Just think about it," Mike said. After they hung up, Ethan sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at his phone. He knew Mike was right. Ignoring the situation wouldn't make it go away. Taking a deep breath, he typed out a message to Lily. "Let's talk." Her response came almost instantly. "Thank you." "When?" Ethan hesitated before replying. "Tomorrow. Somewhere neutral." "Okay, just tell me where." Ethan set his phone down, feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. Tomorrow he would face Lily, and maybe finally get the answers he needed. Ethan arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. It was a small, quiet place on the outskirts of town, far enough from their usual haunts to feel detached from their life together. He chose a table in the corner, tucked away from the sparse crowd of mid-afternoon patrons. He sat facing the entrance, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. At 2 p.m. sharp, Lily walked in. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. Her auburn hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes, once vibrant, were dull and rimmed with red. She scanned the room, spotting Ethan almost instantly, and hesitated before walking over. "Hi," she said softly as she slid into the chair across from him. "Hi," Ethan replied, his voice neutral. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. "Thank you for meeting me," Lily said finally. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's just get to it." "Why?" Lily flinched, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she began. "I've been asking myself the same thing over and over," she said. "And I wish I could give you a simple answer, Ethan. I really do. But the truth is I was selfish. I was stupid. And I made the worst mistake of my life." He didn't respond, his eyes fixed on her as she continued. "I've been feeling lost," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I didn't even realize it until Brandon started paying attention to me. At first it felt harmless. Just jokes, a little flirting. But then it snowballed, and I let it. I let it because it made me feel wanted in a way I didn't even know I was missing." "You felt unwanted?" Ethan asked, his voice edged with disbelief. "Not by you," Lily said quickly, shaking her head. "Ethan, you've always been amazing. Kind, supportive, everything I could ask for in a husband. This wasn't about you. It was about me, about my own insecurities, my own issues." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what? I'm just supposed to forgive you because you were having an identity crisis?" "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't even deserve it. But I want to make things right. I want to fix what I've broken, if you'll let me." Ethan exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "And what about Brandon?" "It's over," she said firmly. "I cut all ties with him the moment you walked into that room. I told him to stay away, and I've already started looking for a new job. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust, Ethan. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on us." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Ethan stared at her, his emotions warring within him. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, love. They all swirled together, leaving him feeling hollow and overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily's head snapped up, her eyes pleading. "Please, Ethan. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I swear." He closed his eyes, his mind flashing back to their wedding day, to the promises they'd made, to the life they'd built together. He thought about the nights they'd spent laughing in bed, the vacations, the shared dreams of starting a family. Could he really throw it all away? Could he really forgive her? When he opened his eyes, Lily was watching him, her face etched with desperation. "I don't have an answer for you right now," he said slowly. "This isn't something I can decide overnight. I need time and space." Lily nodded, her tears spilling over. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll wait, Ethan. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait for you." He stood, reaching into his pocket to leave some cash on the table. "I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk again." "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the cool autumn air hitting his face as he stepped outside. For the first time in weeks, he felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't the end. But it wasn't a new beginning either. It was something in between, a place where choices would be made and lives would change for better or worse. Ethan didn't know where the road would lead, but for now he was content to take one step at a time.